Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Shadows of the Lost. Episode 12. Chapter 77. Kiera, my mind felt free, despite the sheer weight of everything that had happened. Everything I had forgotten returned to me, new memories and old. I would cherish them all. Meeting the kids, Dulsanra, and of course everyone else with my memories back was special. Truly felt like I had missed them. Although they were around, with my memory back it just felt so much better. I was relieved that Alejandro had managed to convince me, because if I had not trusted him or pushed the kids away, I would never have forgiven myself. Dante, Dulsanra and I had all just showered and gotten dressed, whilst Raven had gone to get us something to eat. We heard that everyone was on their way back, and although the kids were ready for bed, no one was sleepy. The excitement and the relief of the battle being won had pumped everyone's adrenaline. Dad had just said he wanted to have a word with me. I wondered if everything was okay. Eating quickly, I left the room with him, allowing him to lead the way into one of the less used living rooms. "Is everything okay?" I asked. The moment we were in a room alone he gave me one of his Holly smirks before cupping my face and kissing my forehead. "It is, everything is," he said quietly before hugging me tightly. "I'm just glad you're all right." I smiled softly, wrapping my arms around his waist. "I love you, Dad." "Love you too, cutie patootie," he said quietly, nicking my heart thump as I pulled back, unable to stop the huge smile that crossed my face at the mention of my old nickname. "You haven't called me that since I was a child," I said, trying not to get teary. "No matter how old you get, you're still my little angel." My eyes filled with tears, and I hugged him again. "You're right, I always will be, just as you will always be my dad. My first protector," I whispered. He stroked my damp hair. "Always," he promised softly. We stayed silent for a moment before I slowly moved back from the warmth of his embrace. "As much as I loved a trip down memory lane, I'm sure there was something more you wanted to talk to me about, right?" I asked, trying not to worry. He nodded. "There was actually, ready to hear it." I nodded as he gave me a smile, cupping my face. "You're pregnant?" I stared into his cerulean eyes, letting his words sink in. "What? How?" I placed a hand to my forehead, shocked at the news. This was as unplanned as Dante had been. 3 kids later, "I'm sure you know exactly how," Dad remarked, crossing his arms. I blushed before placing a hand on my stomach, my heart beating as a new wave of emotions rushed through me. Excitement, nervousness, and happiness. "Are you sure I am?" I whispered. "The doctor did a scan to confirm it too, it's still early days though," Dad explained, going on to quickly fill me in on how the jinn was still able to struggle against my sedated state. He was drawing on my baby's energy. Just the thought of that made a flash of worry for my child rush through me. Thank the goddess he was gone. "And Alejandro doesn't know, does he?" I asked softly. "No, he doesn't, we only found out today. Only the doctor, Serena, Raven, myself, and a few guards who have been given orders to not speak of it know," Dad replied. My heart skipped a beat and I blushed, remembering how much we'd had. Not that we always didn't, but I bit my lip, pressing my hand gently on my stomach. I can't wait to tell him, he likes me pregnant, I trailed off, blushing when Dad raised an eyebrow with an amused smirk on his face. I'm glad he takes care of you. Back then I never expected him to be your mate, and when he proved he cared for you, I was content. I didn't think there was anything that would make me approve even more of him. Yet with every passing year, he has shown he is the ideal mate, father, alpha, and king. My girl deserved the best and she got it. I smiled, my heart warming at his words. I couldn't agree more. He may not be perfect to others, but he's perfect for me. Dad gave a small nod and I smiled. He may not admit it, but he and Alejandro also had a good bond. They're back. They're back. They're here. I heard Azura's shout, my heart pounding at the return of my king. Thank God. Dad breathed a sigh of relief, and I knew he was as impatient as I was to meet Mom. He opened the door, letting me step out first. I smoothed my black top I was wearing with black sweatpants, my heart thudding with nerves as if it was the first time I was seeing him. Azura was the first one out the door, running out into the night in her sky blue pajamas. The mansion gardens were lit brightly, something especially in place for me, just like the rest of the pack. Mama! She shouted, jumping up into Moin's errands. Baby! Mom replied, hugging her tightly. I smiled at them, my eyes searching for my king. Del! Rayhan whispered looking past me, and I realized Dulsanra had stepped outside. She ran past me and straight into his awaiting arms, as he lifted her up, spinning her around before kissing her like there was no tomorrow. A perfect couple, one who had been put through so much. Thank you, Selene, for uniting them once again. She was crying softly as he stroked her hair, whispering sweet words into her ear and promises that I knew he would always keep. Dad walked over to Mom, hugging her tightly before he kissed her hard, but I was somehow rooted to my spot. The quintuplets came running out to Liam, and he crouched down as he gathered them all up in his arms, kissing them. Raven paused, giving me a hug before she ran to Liam. And that's when I saw him. He towered over the rest as he now came into view. He was in a clean pair of grey sweatpants, his godlike body on full display, igniting that pleasure that only he could deep within me. His dark eyes flashed red, glowing as they locked with mine before he walked through the crowd swiftly, and then he was before me. His dark eyes held 1,000 emotions. He threaded one hand into my hair, the other cupping my neck and face, making a flurry of sparks course through me. My heart was pounding, my eyes now fixed on my king. I missed you, amor mio, I missed you too, my king. I whispered, cupping his face. I pulled him down, locking my arms around his neck. His lips met mine in a powerful hungry kiss, one arm snaking around my waist and the other supporting the back of my head as he kissed me so deeply I felt giddy. Sparks, emotions and pleasure creating the perfect magic that only Alejandro could inflict me with. The taste of his mouth, his scent, it was heaven on earth for me. He was my everything. I hugged him tightly as he slipped his tongue into my mouth, and my eyes fluttered shut. I bit back my moan, simply sighing in pleasure. I could feel every inch of his body against mine, every ridge, every muscle. My Alejandro, my mate. My king, my all. We broke apart when I gasped for air and he forced himself back, both of us very aware of the semi-hard-on he was now supporting. My eyes dipped down and I smiled seductively. I loved him in grey sweatpants, and right now. Goddess! Do you remember everything again? He asked me, concern clear in those eyes as he took hold of my chin and rubbed his thumb along my lips. I flicked it with my tongue, making his eyes flash. Keep at it and I will mark you right here. He warned me through the link. I smiled slightly at that thought, and it made my core knot before I looked up into his eyes once more. I do. Everything. When you saved my life outside the cinema, to the time in the doctor's office, to the first time you told me you loved me. When you asked me to marry you, my heart was thumping. I know right now everyone was around, but I wanted to tell him. The time you asked me if I wanted to be a mama? Remember? He smirked, despite the relief I saw in his eyes. Yeah, I do. Well then. Tell me, what do you think of pups? I asked, trying to hide my smile, blinking up at him innocently. He glanced sideways at where Skyla and Catalia were standing with Mom and Dad. Rayhan had his arm around Dante's shoulders, although most eyes were now on us. Aaron, Sienna, Tatum, all were present as Maria hugged and kissed them. Pups. Yeah, they are weird, but they're not bad. He said, making me smile. One. So, want to be a papa again? He looked surprised. Something that was pretty rare for Alejandro. I heard Leo scoff. A dad at that age? Is his D** still even functioning? Okay, so everyone's attention was now on us. Alejandro glared at him as Azura looked between us suspiciously. Trust me, it works way better than yours ever will. Boys. There are children here. Maria scolded. And this is why you're needed. Marcel remarked. Maria smiled sadly and gave a small nod, looking down at Sienna in her arms. A few of the others laughed, and I could feel Dad's, Raven's, and Serena's eyes on me. Alejandro looked back at me, raising an eyebrow. Didn't you say we were done? Even though you know I like you pregnant? He said, winking at me suggestively. Good, because I am pregnant. I said, once again surprising him. What? Dante said, shocked. I looked between him and his father, as a few gasps filled the air and then silence filled the garden. Okay, no one was expecting that. Oh goddess, not another Rossi! Azura exclaimed dramatically, placing the back of her hand against her forehead before she fell flat on her back, pretending to faint. Say baby, Mama? Catalia asked, her eyes sparkling. Yes, my angel. A little sister or brother. I held my hand out to her and she came over, hugging me tightly, placing her hand on my stomach. Azura. I got a minion too. Another one. Now I have Aaron, Sienna, Tatum, and 2 more babies. I have 5 too. Skyla said victoriously. Azura sat up, frowning. Oh yeah, she wasn't pleased. Alejandro said, as if it had just sunk in, making me look away from the children and up at him. You seem okay with it, of course I am. Even if it wasn't planned. Then I'm happy. he said. Bending down, he kissed me once more, placing his hand on my stomach. His eyes met mine before he nudged my nose with his, making me smile. He kissed me softly before lifting Catalia into his arms and placing his other arm around me. I guess we got a little carried away and didn't think of contraception, hey? He added, through the link. A little? I think that's an understatement. Well, at least I get to see my queen pregnant once again. You have a kink. I won't deny it. There's just something different about you when you're pregnant. I blushed as he smirked, knowing he had won that conversation. Everyone, aside from Leo, came over to congratulate us. I hugged Mom and Maria. I was glad everyone had gotten home safe and sound. It was past midnight, but it was obvious no one wanted to sleep. It was nice to see Leo and Rayhan both in the lounge at the same time, although Leo was in the corner, on his phone, whilst Rayhan was with Del and his kids. Dante had just come over, staring at my stomach, deep in thought. "What's up, Dante?" I asked him, wrapping my arm around my brave little boy. "I never saw it." "I always know," he murmured. I frowned, a sliver of fear rushing through me. Did it mean it wouldn't last or something? "You don't see your sibling in the future?" I asked, trying to sound normal. He smiled slightly. "I do now, a little, but I think he was blocking me from knowing." He frowned, and for a second, he looked angry. "Maybe, but he's gone now," I said, knowing what he meant. That made him smile confidently. "He is, he didn't even get to return to hell," he said proudly. Our eyes met and I planted a kiss on his forehead. "I am proud of you," I whispered. He had so much on his shoulders despite how young he was, it hurt at times knowing the burdens he carried. Who knows the extent of what he had to carry yet couldn't share with anyone. "I'm proud of you too," he said, making me smile. "Are you sure you're not in pain?" Azura was asking Leo. "Like sure. I turned, wondering what that was about, as Raven smiled. "She made a voodoo doll of him, it's currently in the kitchen, soaking in vinegar and chilies," she whispered as Leo raised an eyebrow, frowning at her. "No, I'm not. Why do you keep asking me that?" Leo growled. "Azura, stop annoying him. Come here," Mom said. "Gosh. It's his time of the month," Azura said, rolling her eyes as she turned away from him. "What?" Leo growled. "Liam says Raven is always angry when it's her time of the." Liam was by Azura's side, clamping a hand on her mouth. "Why not let her finish that sentence, baby?" Raven suggested sweetly. Her eyes flashing dangerously, making a few of the men in the room snicker. "Nah, I think she's done," Liam replied, looking down at Azura, who was glaring daggers at him, whilst Leo was smirking at Liam's expense. "You really are unlucky," Rayhan remarked, looking at Liam. Just then, Claire and Clara entered with trays of hot and cold drinks. "Thank you," I said smiling. "Come join us. You both have done so much." "Thank you." The rest agreed with me and Mom, Maria, and Raven also thanked them. "Oh, thank you," Claire said, not refusing me as she took a seat to the side near the children. They were a part of our family and have always been here for us. I smiled looking around. Alejandro had his hand on my thigh whilst playing with the younger boys. Catalia was sitting hugging her teddy near my feet, smiling happily. She had asked Alejandro about Enrique and he had told he was with people who loved him and that he'd be keeping an eye on him too. Sienna and Tatum had fallen asleep. Serena and Darien were cuddled together, Mom and Dad. Dulsanra and Rayhan. Rayhana had her head in Maria's lap, with her legs in Chris' lap. Marcel was sitting on the sofa next to Raven as Liam sat back down, hugging her tightly and mind-linking her something which made her blush. Skyla had gone to get something but still wasn't back. I felt relieved though, we could relax once more. Everything was okay again. Yes, we had lost some and that is something that would remain with us and the families of those who had lost their loved ones, but we would try to be there for them, the best we could. I was still grateful for everything we had. Ta-da! Skyla said. We all turned to look at her and my heart almost skipped a beat. In her arms she was holding what looked like an alien. Alejandro muttered. It took me a few seconds to realize it was a cat, one that had been shaved, put in a dress, and was wearing a black wig with 2 plaits. It looked scary. This is my minion. Every villain had a minion. She stated. That's scary. Liam stated, earning a frown from her. Don't judge things and people by their looks, uncle. She scolded. Yeah, Liam. Azura said, truly fascinated by Skyla's horrifying creation. Do you guys like it? Skyla asked, her green eyes glinting. Mom started as Dulsanra simply blinked at the cat that had now jumped from Skyla's arm and meowed, running to the window. If that wasn't a sign of its trauma, I don't know what else we needed. My question is, how did you remove the hair? Raven asked. You could tell she had missed spots. With an electric shaver. Skyla replied, making Alejandro sigh. That's some weird shit. He said through the link, massaging his jaw. And my question is, where did that cat come from? I asked, looking around. Was it new? I think it belongs to Drake's son. Serena added, making me frown. Skyla, did you steal it? No, I just took it. She said, looking guilty. I raised an eyebrow, but decided I would talk to her alone. She would be taking the cat back to its rightful owner, and if they didn't want it anymore thanks to her horrific transformation, I would make sure it's given to a new home. I think she had been given a little too much freedom with everything going on, and it was high time I got back into mom mode and held her accountable for her actions. We'll discuss this tomorrow, I said firmly with a small smile. She gulped and nodded, exchanging looks with Azura. Oh, dear. It seems like another Rossi's in trouble. What else is new? Azura remarked, making Leo snicker. That kid's on crack. Yet you find her amusing. Marcel replied, frowning at him. She's entertaining. He replied, shrugging, his eyes fixed on his phone. Crazy all around. So who's tired? Alejandro asked, picking up a mug of hot chocolate. No one. Azura replied. Oh yeah. Rayhan, tired? No, not really. Why? He replied, clearly wondering why Alejandro was asking. Good, then how about I have a word with you and Leo now? He said, standing up. The room went considerably quieter, and I heard Leo sigh in frustration, really? Yet, because I know you won't be here in the morning. Alejandro replied, looking at him. Fine. He stood up, frowning coldly, his aura radiating off of him. Someone's in trouble. Azura sang tauntingly. Leo glared at her before turning his eyes to Dante. Now I know why you swore on her. She's psycho. He muttered. Leo. Marcel growled in warning. But the youngster simply gave his father the finger before disappearing from the room. Mom frowned but said nothing as she pulled Azura into her arms, kissing her cheek and smiling at her. No matter how tough Mom acted, I knew she worried about Azura. We all heard it, that she acted the way she did because she was born by magic. Even though that wasn't true, it was what many thought. I knew it affected Mom, and why wouldn't it? It affected us all. Azura was a child, and it hurt to know she would face a lot of challenges growing up. I just wish people changed their mentality before then. Rayhan kissed Dulsanra, clearly not wanting to leave her, and I didn't blame him. They had suffered the most in many ways. Let's get this over with then. He said, running his hand through his hair as he looked at Alejandro. Alejandro nodded, looking down at me, and I stood up. He wrapped his hand around my neck, kissing me and leaving my lips tingling before he too left the room. I knew what they were going to talk about, and I just hoped it went well. That one was a long time coming. Dad said, and Marcel nodded in agreement. Yeah, they needed to do this. I'm still impressed that they worked together. Mom added with a smile. Dante smirked slightly, and I glanced down at him. I had heard what happened, but he hadn't said much more than what we already knew. My little hero may not have been on the battlefield, but he had still contributed. Good luck, my king, one said to Alejandro through the bond. Thanks, I might just need it. I smiled at his response, knowing if anyone could get through to the boys, it was Alejandro. Alejandro, I shut the door to my office behind me. Leo was already sitting in one of the chairs, his long legs sprawled out in front of him, hands in his pockets and his face set in a cold frown. Rayhan walked over to the window, leaning against the wall, and crossed his arms. As much as I didn't want to do this right after that battle, knowing there were families who were mourning their losses, knowing that I had a shitload to do in the morning and so much more, I also couldn't let this chance slip away. I knew Leo would be gone before morning came, I knew him enough to know that. The fact he and Rayhan worked together gave me some hope, and the fact he stayed in the same place as Rayhan without causing issues for a few hours. I ain't got all night. Leo said as I dropped into my office chair, my body was exhausted. Yeah well, I'll get to it. You both know why I've called you here. I want you both to say exactly what you feel, but I want you both to listen whilst the other talks, all right? No interrupting. I commanded, my alpha command weighing down on them. I saw Leo's eyes flash with irritation. Fine. Rayhan said quietly. I'm not forcing you to agree. Just give each other a chance. I added quietly, knowing Leo hated any form of command. I sat back, taking out a cigarette from a packet, about to put the box away when instead I offered it to my younger nephew. After a moment's hesitation, he took one, and I lit his before lighting my own. Want one? I asked Rayhan, who simply raised an eyebrow. No thanks, he said before opening the window next to him. Leo scoffed as he sat back, and I ran my hand through my hair. Well, here goes. We all know what Dulsanra went through at the hands of Endora. I've had this conversation with you, Leo. Do you want me to go over it? I know, I was there, remember? I witnessed all the shit that went on there. He said coldly, his eyes becoming ice. I frowned and nodded. Very well, so you know that she was beaten to within an inch of her life on a daily basis, made to do Endora's biddings, and if she refused, she was simply beaten further. I asked quietly. There were the hunters who had done worse to Dulsanra, but Rayhan had hunted and killed them all. We had lost RAF because of that fight. There were also corrupt witches who had helped the hunters. I know Rayhan hated the hunters with even more vengeance than he had the Sangui pack, but he had killed all those involved. I sighed heavily. There were many who hurt her willingly, many who were commanded to hurt her, blackmailed or out of fear of being beaten themselves, for survival, and those who were brave enough to refuse were then compelled under magic to hurt her. These rogues were all gathered by Endora, and she built her army by fear and control. I looked between both of them, both were quiet until now. Rayhan did what he felt was right, seeing what his mate had gone through would affect anyone, we would destroy the world for our mates. The need to protect our mates is so intense that until you have a mate you won't understand that. I'm not saying that it was completely right, I'm just saying when your mate is hurt you don't see anything but to make it better. I said quietly. I could feel Leo's anger rising, but he didn't speak, although I knew even with my command he could if he wanted. Rayhan, do you want to put your points forward? Do you want to tell Leo exactly what happened when you went to the Sangui pack long ago? He gave a curt nod before slipping his hands into his pockets. I first took the files from you after promising that I wouldn't show them to anyone. You were reluctant to give them to me. I then asked Dulsanra which ones had hurt her. She pointed out those that she remembered and then we went to the Sangui pack. I had told Marcel which men it was and so they were already gathered. He sighed, turning to look out at the moon. The pain in his eyes was clear, no matter how much time passed, it was obvious it didn't go away entirely. I glanced at Leo, who was smoking away indifferently, tapping his foot silently as if bored. Dulsanra told me that there were those who had been forced to hurt her and to not do this. But you didn't listen. Leo said. Rayhan frowned. They couldn't just get away with it. I first separated those who were forced and had felt guilt to step forward, deciding they would get one beating and be let off. I only beat a few of these because Dulsanra pleaded at me to let them go, and I did. As I had thought and heard, but still, Leo didn't seem to look surprised, almost as if he knew that. I frowned as Rayhan sighed. I let them go, that group felt remorse and had been under spells. There was an older man who even talked about some she-wolf who hung with Dulsanra when she was mid-mutating to a Wendigo or something. He continued. Then I sent Dulsanra with Liam. After that, the group who were compelled and felt no remorse were beaten and bound in silver for a month. Leo cut in. Yehi, and the rest who hurt her willingly, I killed. Leo smirked and nodded. Yet. Anything else? He asked. Rayhan frowned but looked down. Maybe I was too harsh, but there were guards in your pack who had hurt her too, those in the upper ranks of the Sangui pack. Should people like that be given a second chance? Rogues are exiled wolves, either they commit crimes or weren't worthy of staying in a pack because of disobedience, to begin with. Having ranked wolves who had committed that many crimes? That isn't something that should ever be allowed. And then there are those who were born rogues. Does a child need to suffer for their parents' sins? Leo asked, now sitting forward as he turned and looked at Rayhan. The thing is, this is the last time I'm going to talk about this because it's obvious you both will never get it. Dad was born a rogue, he knew nothing but what Endora taught him. Most of those men were born to rogues that Endora gathered. That's the only life we knew. Obey or be killed. Survival, it's the basic instinct all living things have. He licked his lips, exhaling sharply as he stood up. You mentioning where we came from, that was the last straw and it shows that you'll never get it. We will always be beneath the elite, you folk. He raised his hands in a mock surrendering gesture. Leo, I began when he shook his head. I'm not done. He said quietly, his eyes flashing. There was something different in the way he was talking, and deep down I worried that if I didn't get through to him tonight, my chance would be gone. I nodded, motioning for him to carry on. You know those men that you killed? The ones that hurt her willingly? Do you know they were told to beat a witch, which if you forget was the common enemy for us werewolves? Or did you all forget that little detail when you changed your opinion the moment Arasi had a witch mate and a witch daughter? When it affected the Leaken King's family, of course, he was going to suddenly change sides or consider acceptance. I frowned, as did Rayhan, my stomach twisting. He had a point. But that's because we saw the good in them. Del and Ri showed us that not all witches were bad. We were wrong to judge them all as one. I said quietly. He nodded. Yet, but how do you explain that to a man whose own mate was threatened to be killed off if he didn't beat a witch? A monster as we were taught? Obviously, he'll choose to attack a monster who was helping Endora, who was as psychotic. And that is why the rogues were given a chance at a fresh start, because I don't agree with Rayhan there. They deserved a chance at a new life. I began. Sure, but you took that promise right back when you gave him access to those files. You gave us so much hope, that me and the other kids were so excited to live a life like we heard others had. We'd get to go to school, train, watch movies, listen to music, have proper homes, and have fun like normal kids, but everything was taken away the moment you let another alpha walk into our pack and forced our alpha to submit. The pain in his voice was thick, yet his tone remained hard and angry as he glared at me. His eyes held a haunted look that I had seen on the faces of many back in those caves. Leo, I'm not done. Dad never mentioned it, but years after the effect of that massacre, and what Rayhan did was a massacre, it haunted us. When you killed all those men, you killed their mates. You made so many children orphans. Dad is at fault, you are at fault, and above all, Ravlian is at fault. I don't care about the reasons, the way that was handled was wrong. I watched those killings, those beatings through a vent. I watched how Dad sat in an adjoining room, head in hands, as his pack members were beaten. You did it all for your mate, Vet. You took away the mates of many. Leo continued, his eyes going from me to Rayhan, blazing a steely blue. I could tell it was hard for him to talk about it, and I got it. I had stuck up. And you know, from those who were compelled, who had been brave enough to refuse to beat her. Let me give you an example, you know one of them, he had refused to beat her, and Endora ended up killing his daughter. His mate also struggled to carry a pup due to being beaten, because he tried to do the right thing. So, when you asked him if he felt remorse, why would he? She was just a witch to him. He was still mourning the loss of his daughter. What did you want him to say? Yeah, I felt bad. And to top it off, his mate, who had suffered beatings, was pregnant when you showed up, was classed as high risk, and she almost died when he was bound in silver for a month by you. You hurt a pregnant woman, almost killed their miracle child. Rayhan was looking down, and I saw the guilt in his eyes. Dad could do nothing because he's a coward, one who had just found his family and feared losing you all, but if he was half the man he should have been. He should have protected his pack, not appeased his so-called family, because his real family was meant to be his pack. Blood does not make you family. Leo shook his head and smirked coldly. And that's why, I will never consider you all my real family, because my duty is to my pack, to make sure no one ever abuses them the way you all did. Yeah, you too, Alpha King Alejandro. You created files on us like we were criminals. Given a chance, sure that's what it was, but we had thought we were given the chance to a fresh start. Fresh start yet criminal files? Doesn't sound like a clean, fresh start to me. That was for the safety of all packs, Leo. I said quietly. Oh yeah? Then tell me, did you have a file on me and Dad? I frowned. No. I know where he was going with this, and I knew he was making fair points. No? Surely the Rogue King had an entire list of crimes on his back. He should have been on the records. Shit, I forgot, he's a Rossi. You get an entire pass, right? Let's be honest, it's the only reason I can behave like a D** and none of you do, right? His words were bitter and full of resentfulness. I get it, I made a mistake. I didn't think it through. I'm sorry, Leo. I'll admit to it, if I can make up for it, then tell me what you want. Rayhan said quietly, to my surprise, and he meant it, I could see it in his eyes. But even before Leo replied, I realized it wasn't going to be enough, it was too late, and Leo's hatred wasn't going to go away. You're sorry. You're sorry won't bring back all those lives you destroyed. The Sangui Pack has so many people who suffer from PTSD due to everything we witnessed and suffered, but the mate of an elite was far more important than all those other lives, right? Well, carry on. No sorry, no regret will bring that back, and what gets to me the most is you all are so far up your own that you needed me to lay it out to you, years later, for you to even consider that you have had a lot happen to you. He tossed the cigarette he had crushed in his hand onto the ashtray, looking at us both with unmasked hatred. You're right, and I'll work on this. I'll try to fix things, I get that I tried again. It's too late. 6 years too late. We're doing okay without your help, thanks. He replied coldly. But I promise you here and now, the moment I become Alpha, the Sangui pack will not be under this council. Oh, and don't try to treat me like your family, because I don't consider you mine. Touch my pack, and I will destroy you all. Not waiting for a reply, he turned and walked out. Leo. Listen. I stopped the moment the front door opened. He pulled his jacket off, shifted, picked up his jacket in his mouth and ran off into the night. Rayhan sighed. I messed up. I didn't think of it like that. Even Dulsanra wasn't happy with what happened. It's not only your fault, you were what? 21? I should have thought. Marcel didn't say anything either. It had been 2 years, didn't he think he could speak up? I said quietly. I'm sorry, I felt it was atonement for the crimes I had committed under her control. Marcel said quietly. This is on me too, I wasn't a good alpha or father. Marcel, this has happened now, but when RAF and I accepted you, it meant we accepted you, not for you to just try to keep us happy. None of us are perfect, but that's how shit is. We talk, we discuss, we advise, and we disagree. I said. He nodded, and for a moment he looked older and tired. I know. With time I realized that. Then promise me from here on you'll use that brain and speak your mind. I said. He gave me a small smile and nodded. But the mood was heavy as we all stared at the open door. I didn't say anything. Right now I felt like I had failed. Leo had been suffering more than he let on. You could tell he cared for his pack, for those that had suffered, to the point he used to defy Endora's commands and sneak Dulsanra food. He had a heart that cared, yet he felt inferior. His remark about leaving the council remained, and I wondered if he truly would follow up on it. Kiera, it had been a week since the day I got my memories back. Everyone had gone home, and we had spent the last few days busy with burials, supporting families who had lost loved ones and making sure everything was in order once again. Although Alejandro wanted me to rest, I refused. I had just gotten my memory back and I had been enough trouble for everyone, so I just wanted to do what I could. Besides, I was completely fine. The pregnancy was so far going well, and I couldn't even tell I was pregnant. I felt great. I had made Skyla return the kitty, and the poor boy had taken it, bursting into tears at the fact that she had shaved it. I had decided she wouldn't be getting any money for the next 3 months from Alejandro. Something he thought I was being really harsh with because we both knew Skyla loved money a bit too much. But she needed to learn that taking things without permission was extremely wrong. It wasn't like she was lacking anything. Katalia was getting therapy from Dulsanra, and we all agreed she had a long way to go before she would be healed. What happened was something that would stick with her for life. Alejandro had contacted someone from the Fuego de Ceniza pack, but the man had been adamant that they needed nothing and that they would take care of Enrique. Alejandro didn't back down, but they were adamant that they wanted nothing to do with us. We were both sure it was from Enrique himself, and if that was the case, it meant he didn't really have a guardian who could guide him. So Alejandro had decided he would send someone to Puerto Rico to keep an eye on him from the shadows, feeling it was his responsibility to look out for him. Leo had left and Alejandro had told me exactly what had happened. I knew Alejandro was disappointed in himself, but even I was at fault. I had been the one to encourage him to give Rayhan the files back then. We were all at fault, but even though Dulsanra, me, and Rayhan had offered to apologize to the people of the Sangui pack, Leo had refused to even hear from any of us. Marcel had said Leo had decided to go abroad for further studies. He was worried, but it was obvious Leo needed to get away from us all and just have a break. Maybe it was what he needed. Maria had a good cry before she had left for home, and although she had wanted to go to RAF, it was obviously not her time. She had said if this was a sign, she'd try to work hard and to carry on. Alejandro had suggested she make herself busy with the pack, and so she had decided to take up the position of the Black Storm head warrior. Something she never ever considered until Al had suggested it, saying she was an incredible warrior, and she truly was. I just hoped it kept her occupied, and I promised to call her more often too. We would be there for her as family should Alejandro and I were going out for lunch today. It was the first peaceful day after a crazy week. The kids were over at Drake's place since they had a kids' party going on, and it gave me and Alejandro the chance to get away. The weather was warm, and I was wearing a white and pink floral chiffon high-low dress with a string crisscross back. I was wearing beige heels and carrying a matching bag. I had dressed up after ages, but with everything going on it wasn't the same. The moment Alejandro had seen me, even now as we walked through the pack grounds, his eyes were stuck on me. I smiled. I guess getting my nails and hair done had been worth it. I loved how he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Knowing he was undressing me with his eyes. He himself looked incredibly as usual, wearing a white shirt with his sleeves pushed up and some buttons left open that showed off his chains around his neck, paired with grey pants, shoes, and a pair of shades. So where exactly are we going? I asked. He gave my hand, which was entwined with his, a gentle squeeze. You'll find out, he said, not giving much away. I leaned in, tilting my head up slightly, and he smirked, bending down and kissing me deeply. Letting go of my hand, he pulled me tightly against himself, his hand tangling into my curls as he deepened the kiss. I was unable to hold back the whimper that left my lips. Don't worry. Today and tonight, you're all mine. Willingly. I replied softly, licking my lips. He smirked. You always have been willing to spread those legs for me, amor mio. I gasped, fainting a mock offended look. Oh? It's not like you never get hard for me, just like now, I whispered seductively, slowly running my hand down his abs, but before I could even stroke him, we heard footsteps, and I smoothly stepped back. It was just a few of the pack's teens. I saw Alejandro frown for a fraction of a second, before he schooled his face into passiveness once more. Afternoon Alpha, Luna. They greeted. Hey boys. I smiled. You look beautiful. One of them complimented me, before looking at Alejandro furtively. Yeah, move along. He growled, making me laugh. They nodded, chuckling as they ran off. With time the fear that they had of Alejandro had changed. Yes, they feared him and respected him. With the passing of years, I had seen how much Alejandro had changed. Seeing the growth in him and how he continued to strive to do better. To make things better for us all and admitting to mistakes. My man was more than a king by name, he was so much more, and every day he only made me prouder. What's on your mind? I asked, sensing his emotions. The boy in the middle, he's Fred's. Fred's? It took me a moment before I realized what he had just said, what he meant. My heart thumped and I looked towards the boys. I knew instantly which one he meant. Atlas. The boy with the dirty blonde hair. How had I never noticed it? I looked at Alejandro, seeing the conflicted look in his eyes. Why did you never mention it? I asked quietly. He sighed, his eyes met mine before glancing around. Let's get out of here first. I nodded as he placed an arm around my waist and led me away. It was a short while later and we were down by the river. An entire picnic had been set up for us in the secluded area, with Al smirking as he stated there wouldn't be anyone within miles. It was obvious he had planned for us to do a lot more here than eat, not that I minded. The sun was warming my skin, and the pleasant gushing of the river felt like a peaceful melody to my ears. We had just opened the picnic basket and were eating, as I waited for Alejandro to tell me about Fred's son. I don't know why I never mentioned it, it's just, obviously you can tell by his age that he was born whilst Fred was mated to Indigo. Yet, he's not even of age. I said quietly. Yet, but he isn't at fault. I didn't want it to become known to the point of it affecting the pup in any way. The topic of Indigo was sensitive to your parents, and so it just never came up. Fred was a player, and that's what I always thought was going on between them. I never thought that he was actually abusing her as well. He said seriously, drinking some of the cold juice. I nodded. I understood that, and he was right, the child was not at fault. I get it, but that means that Azura has a brother. I said softly. Yeah. I guess so. He replied. Our eyes met, and I knew that it was something Mom and Dad had a right to know. You know we have to tell Mom and Dad. Even Azura has a right to know one day. Yeah, I know. I looked at him, and although I was sitting just a foot away from him, it felt too far. I got up, climbed into his lap and cupped his face, enjoying the sparks that shot through me. Don't blame yourself for what happened to Auntie Indy. It's a little like Raven, we never knew what she was going through. Sometimes we don't know what's happening behind closed doors or behind a smiling face. You have always done your best, Alejandro, and you always will. If you want, I can tell Mom and Dad myself. I said, trying not to react to the way he was running his hands up and down my waist. I'm not a wuss, amor mio, we'll do that shit together when the time comes. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Okay, as you wish. Our eyes met before I slowly placed a hand on my stomach as he kissed my neck sensually. His scent making me giddy. Can you believe we are going to be parents again? I whispered, still feeling odd. To be honest, it's still crazy, but I'm looking forward to it. What do you think the gender is? I don't actually know, I asked Dante and he simply said, it doesn't work like that. I smiled. Alejandro's smirk faltered, and he nodded. The fact the Jinn was shielding it from him, from us, one obviously, he knew that if we knew, we would have made sure I was taken care of, but he needed something to fight my own body with. Using our pup to do it, his eyes flashed, and I softly kissed him on his mate mark. He's gone now, completely. Even Janina said the only reason he had such a strong hold on me was that I was pregnant. He was drawing strength from the fetus, and I was in turn, healing the fetus, keeping the jin's hold strong. I sighed. Yeah, it's how his hold on you strengthened. Once you got pregnant, he got an extra hold, one that didn't bind you to me. At least you're both okay, he said, brushing his hand down my stomach, his eyes softening. Another little weirdo. I smiled. Our adorable little weirdo. 100%. Our eyes met, and we leaned in, our lips meeting in a passionate kiss. This was the contentment and happiness one needed in life, and although I knew the future would hold many more trials as our children grew, facing their own trials and tribulations, we would be there to handle it, to help and guide them. Dante was a demigod, and that in itself blew my mind away, but even my own senses told me there was a reason for it. But when the time came, we were all here, ready to be by his side to deal with whatever came our way. Together forever. One for all for one. United we will always be strong. We broke away, eating a little more, before Alejandro stood up and began to undress. I bit my lip, enjoying the view of the god before me, the sun shining down off his glorious body, enjoying the show, amor mio. Oh, absolutely. Do I get a strip dance? I teased. No, if anyone's dancing, it's you. Now strip. I raised my eyebrows as he removed his pants, only keeping his boxers on, and I realized he was about to get into the river. He walked over to the edge and stepped into the water before turning and watching me. I pulled my dress off, tossing it aside sexily, making his eyes flash. I kicked off my heels before I broke into a run. A few feet from the riverbank, I did a flip, my eyes on Alejandro. 3, 2. I got you. Alejandro smirked, the moment I landed with my legs on his shoulders, as I raised my arms as if celebrating my victory. I'm still as agile as I was years ago, I said, tossing my hair over my shoulder. I think I should get the credit for that, since I'm the one who keeps you so flexible with the intense workouts. He remarked. I raised an eyebrow, looking down at him, as I twisted my hand into his hair. Loving the way his eyes were on me. Oh? Then how about we have another intense workout, Alpha? I whispered seductively as I slid off his shoulders gracefully and let my legs drop into the water. He hissed in pleasure, his eyes flashing as I ran my hand down his boxers. Looks like my favorite toy is all ready for me. I whispered, I'll be underwater. I didn't mind, there was just something about lacking oxygen and knowing I'll be at his mercy entirely. Always. Now, how about you be a good little girl and start playing with your favorite toy? He growled huskily, his hand twisting into my hair. His words alone made me shiver in anticipation. With pleasure. I whispered, he was my addiction, one I craved day and night. And I was the only one who had power over my Lycan king, the only one who was able to pleasure him like this, and the only one he would ever submit to. Just as he was my king, I was his queen. Alejandro, the moment my queen into the water, it was heaven. My world. I was glad her memories were back, but above all, the fact that she was safe in herself. The only thing that would make this moment better was if I could see her clearly. I tugged her back and up out of the water as she gasped for air. I wrapped my arms around her tightly, pulling her against my chest, kissing her neck hungrily and breathing hard from the pleasure that was still tingling through me, giving her time to recover. Her breathing was heavy. Her heart was pounding, but when I looked into those gorgeous purple glowing eyes of hers, I only saw satisfaction, love, and desire. You're heaven and sin all in one. I growled huskily before kissing her lips roughly. She instantly locked her legs around my waist as we kissed like it was the first time, but with her, it was. Every moment, every touch, and every kiss was something new and intense. I love you. I love you, I said through the link, unable to hold back the intensity of my emotions. She broke away from my lips, hers looking plumper than normal. I love you too, now, an eternity. She whispered, her voice sounding so good. She caressed my face, her eyes softened before she leaned in kissing me softly. Our hearts were pounding, and this time when I kissed her, it was slower, painstakingly slower, yet it felt so good. Each caress, each nibble or suck on her plush lips was perfect. Our kisses creating moans from those heavenly lips of hers, and I won't deny that I didn't bother holding back my own sounds of pleasure. Our tongues played with each other's, stroking, and simply dancing to the same rhythm, one of love and pleasure. You know you're perfect. I growled. She whimpered, and I knew they were probably already extra sensitive due to her pregnancy. I kissed her hard, carrying her to the edge of the riverbank, placing her on the ground. The branches of a nearby tree hung over us slightly, casting some shade over her soaking body that glistened under the sun. She looked up at me with hooded eyes as I trailed my gaze over her body. That was so good, she breathed. Yeah, so much for getting my hair done. She laughed softly. You still looking ravishing, no matter whether your hair looks good enough to yank on or whether it's full of twigs and leaves. I smirked, making her pout as she reached up touching her hair. I don't think I want to see it. She pouted, making me smirk. Oh yeah? Well, trust me, you look perfect. Our eyes met. In the distance you could hear birds chirping and the rustle of leaves, but the only sound I could focus on was her heartbeat and our intense emotions running through the bond. Emotions that blended together so perfectly that you couldn't make out where mine ended and hers began. I looked into those gorgeous eyes of hers before I leaned down and kissed her deeply. The sweet taste of her mouth was so tantalizing, and after a moment, I forced myself back, throbbing hard. Come on, let's get back in the water, I said, sitting up and tugging her up. We both slipped back into the water, brushing the bits of twigs, dirt, and leaves off us. We didn't even finish our food, she said, sounding cute as I picked a leaf from her hair. Didn't I fill you up enough, or want me to go a few more rounds? I asked huskily, making her bite her lip. That doesn't sound like a bad idea, but you know tonight we are having movie night with the kiddies, I need to be awake for it. She replied, amused. Oh yeah? Yes. She poked her eyes out at me. Smirking, I pulled her into my arms, simply holding her against my chest. So, I was thinking, want to go on a family holiday somewhere? That would be nice, so like everyone, right? I raised an eyebrow. Well, I won't lie, I was thinking just us two and the kids. She turned in my arms, wrapping hers around my neck. That would also be nice. Ari's planning some shit for December time anyway, but I was thinking before this pup comes along, let's just do something with the kids. Kat's become more closed up and I think she could do with the calm, and so could I. I love our family but you know sometimes we just need some alone time too. She smiled. I like the idea, we could ask the kids where they would like to go too. She suggested kissing my chest. I was already aware of her against me, and although I wasn't done with her, I needed to make sure she wasn't entirely spent. Sounds like a plan. I kissed her neck as she ran her hands down my back, digging her nails in. I growled. That also sounds like a plan. She whispered seductively in my ear. And that's why you're my queen. I growled, before I lifted her up, kissing her once more. She let out a breathless laugh in between kisses. I looked into my queen's eyes. Kiera, please baby. I pleaded looking at Alejandro, who was glaring at the wine-red satin pajama bottoms I was holding out to him. No. He growled, reminding me of a child refusing to do what they were told. Alejandro, I pouted, putting on my most sultry pleading face. No is a no. He said, turning away from me. I huffed in exaggerated annoyance, rolling my eyes. It was evening now, and we had gotten back about 2 hours ago after having fallen asleep near the lake. I could still feel the after effect on my body. There was not an inch of my body that Alejandro had left untouched. We had returned and showered, then I bad arranged the trays for our family tonight with the goodies I had baked that morning whilst Alejandro had left to collect some things. I was now trying to force Alejandro to wear the matching pajamas I had ordered. It had been Catalia's idea for our little movie night, and although she had initially chosen powder blue, I wasn't sure Alejandro or Dante would even have considered them. Don't be silly, it was Kat's idea. I tried again, knowing it may have some impact. He frowned, turning back with a pair of sweatpants in his hands. I don't wear silk. He growled. I tilted my head, trying not to burst into laughter at how amusing this was. He stood there in his fitted black boxers, several chains around his neck and his wet hair brushed back with one falling teasingly over his forehead, glaring at the fabric of subject. I stepped closer to him, batting my lashes. But I really wanted to see how you look in satin. It has the ability to shape things ever so nicely, I whispered seductively, letting my gaze fall to the front of his boxers. He raised an eyebrow. I don't need satin to look like I have ***. It's pretty noticeable no matter what I wear. He replied, making me sigh. Fine, don't wear them then. I guess I'll just tell Catalia that even though we spent an hour trying to choose what color you'd like, you still don't want to wear them. I said, dropping the bottoms onto the drawer. It was only bottoms, the top wouldn't have fit him anyway. It had been such a mission even finding anything that would fit him with his height, and this had been the most suitable color. Kia! He growled. But I didn't reply, simply dropping my towel as I slipped on my lace panties with a matching black bra. I heard him mutter a swear as I bent down and slipped on my own wine-red pajama bottoms, before putting the top on. I was about to button it up when Alejandro stepped up behind me. You're annoying. He growled, kissing my neck. I tried not to sigh in pleasure as I suppressed a smile and raised an eyebrow. I pulled away and turned towards him. How? I just said fine. I said innocently, as I buttoned my top up, leaving the top 3 open, which gave him a very appealing view. You're playing reverse psychology on me. He growled. How? I just said it's fine, I'll tell Kot you didn't want to. I replied innocently as his eyes flashed. My poor, angry, king. Fine, I'll wear the things. He said, glaring at the pajama bottoms, and if his eyes could destroy things by simply looking at them, those pajamas would have been a pile of ash by now. I bit back a laugh and ran my fingers down his muscled arm. Satin or not, nothing will make you lose your masculinity, don't worry, I replied, kissing his shoulders since I couldn't really reach his lips as I was barefoot. He narrowed his eyes before looking at me. The things I do for you girls. Everything we could ever dream of. I whispered. Yeah, I know what you did by playing innocent and emotionally trying to blackmail me. In case you think you won this, I chose to agree. He replied coldly as I left the room, unable to hold back my laughter. Of course. As long as you listen, I don't mind you thinking you won. Smiling, I looked over at the huge bed in my room. We had already arranged the trays of treats on the edge of the bed, consisting of a chocolate and fruit dipping platter, a variety of sweets, and baked goodies that included brownies, blondies, red velvet cookies, and cupcakes. On the bedside table was a selection of iced drinks. Dante was already sitting in his matching pajamas in the center of the bed whilst browsing through the selection of movies. Audiobook and Skyla weren't here yet, so I decided to go get them. Did Dad agree? He asked, making me smile as I walked to the door. I gave him a small nod and he smirked. Obviously, I whispered. I can hear you too. Alejandro called. www. I laughed, leaving the bedroom and almost knocked into Skyla, who was standing there with her hair neatly braided after her shower as she held a black kitten with sharp green eyes. A kitten that suited her very well. Me and Malevolent are ready. She held it up to my face, showing off the silk ribbon around its neck, making me step back as the kitty hissed. Alejandro had felt bad for Skyla and apparently had chosen this kitten for her yesterday. He had gotten one of the men to collect it. Skyla had been beyond happy, although I do think she didn't deserve it right now, but with everything going on I think we all just needed to relax and ease up a little. Malevolent. That's a nice name. I smiled. Oh, it is, she's very evil, aren't you, my little kitty cat? The kitten meowed and I stepped aside, allowing the duo inside. I walked towards the girls' room, just as Audiobook stepped out with Claire. Like always, she held her teddy in her arms. Her hair was braided as well, and she was in her matching pajamas. I smiled at them both. Thank you, Claire. Nothing to thank me for, Luna. Would you like me to tuck them into bed later? No, I think we're having a family sleepover today. I said, making Catalia's eyes light up. Really, Mama? Really, I said, taking her hand and leading her back to mine and Alejandro's bedroom. We had all just gotten comfortable on the bed as Dante glared at the kitten who was purring against Skyla's arm. Ah, Malevolent is such a good bad kitty. She cooed as Alejandro stepped out of the adjoining room, phone in hand and a frown on his face. My heart skipped a beat. He could deny it all he wanted, but he looked pretty in those satin pajama bottoms. Even that was an understatement. He looked too good, his tatted body on full display with his piercings and those drool-worthy abs. I could see the black band of his designer boxers, and every step he took made my attention fall to his package. Oh goddess! I could worship him day and night. My mouth felt dry and I licked my lips, swallowing hard. My core throbbed and I was about to look away when his eyes snapped to mine, making my heart thump. Keep eye me amor mio and movie night will be over faster than you can say want me now. I smiled slightly, as much as I'd love that. This movie night was something I was not going to risk. Noted, I replied with amusement as Catalia settled next to me on the bed. Not wanting to dig into the treats just yet, I asked her, as the other two already were. Alejandro sat down on her other side, making the bed dip slightly, planting a kiss on Catalia's forehead before leaning over and kissing my lips. So what are we watching? He asked, leaning back against the headboard and picking up a can of Coca-Cola for himself. This movie, I said as Dante went back to the movie we had on pause from the start. It was a new kids movie and one that I was sure we would all enjoy. A kids show? Dante said, dropping onto his stomach. The kitten climbed off Sky, coming toward us and making Catalia giggle. Daddy, I named the kitty Malevolent. Skyla said as she helped herself to some chocolates. That's a weird name. Alejandro replied as Catalia stroked it. It isn't. I asked Claire to help me find a name that is similar to Maleficent. Skyla skated. And this one is perfect. It is. The movie began, we chatted and joked as we watched it. It felt good to have everything back to normal again. So why didn't you ask if you had a gift? Since I got Sky the cat. Alejandro was now saying to Catalia, who was resting her head on his chest as she watched the movie. She looked up at him curiously. Did Daddy get me something too? She whispered. Yeah. It isn't much, but I thought you'd like it. He leaned over, taking something from the top drawer next to the bed as I watched them, smiling. He grabbed a little pale pink box and opening it took out a golden locket, making me smile, as Catalia smiled softly. For me. He opened the heart pendant and held it out to her. I could see there were 2 tiny images already inside. Yeah, see, you get to put 2 pictures in it. I put us in there already. I look weird though. He said, making me smile as I watched him. She giggled, taking the necklace. No, Daddy, you look very handsome. She said, her smile fading as she looked at the other image. This, Enrique. You can remove it when you want, but you don't need to always carry Kike around. I thought this shit might be better. Like when you go to school. Her eyes pooled with tears, and I struggled to keep my own back as she flung her arms around Alejandro's neck, kissing his cheek. Thank you, Daddy. She whispered as he wiped her tears away. I looked away, trying not to get emotional. Whether anyone wanted it or not, Enrique was someone she wouldn't forget for a while, and until she was ready to move on we would support her in any way possible. Alejandro leaned over, pulling me into his arms too. So not fair, how dare you have a family hug without me, Malevolent and the red-eyed cockroach. Sky said as she launched herself on top of Alejandro. Oof. Daddy, you knocked the breath from me, why are you such a rock, you jumped on me, remember? He said, wrapping his arm around her and kissing her cheek as Malevolent meowed, wanting to escape the family hug. Oi Roach, wanna join? Alejandro asked Dante, making Skyla cackle. Dante turned, raising an eyebrow. Oh, I didn't realize she was talking about me, I thought Skyla meant you. Dante said haughtily, with a small smirk. I smiled as Skyla and Alejandro frowned at him. Come over here, I said, holding my arm out to him. This is so mushy, Dante muttered, but even then he was trying to hide his shy smile. Yet, it's weird as shit. Alejandro agreed despite the small smile on his own lips. Well, we are a weird family, Skyla said, not caring that Malevolent was clawing Alejandro's chest. Skyla, don't terrify the poor kitten, I said as Dante joined the hug. Catalia let out a small laugh, holding her necklace to her chest, along with Kike. I smiled as I hugged them tightly. My perfect family. My eyes met Alejandro's and we smiled at one another. This was true happiness, having our children safe and happy, by our side. I love you all, I said softly as we all moved back. Love you too, Skyla and Catalia said in unison. Love you too, Mama, Dante said, looking up at me before he reached over and brushed a strand of my hair back. I'm sorry for everything you went through. It was not your fault, I said softly, my heart thundering as I remembered how I had tried to stab him. There was just no way that I could ever think of doing that. You're still the most amazing woman ever, Dante said. Until your mate comes along, then you'll be running after her, Alejandro remarked. Dante frowned. If I have a mate, he murmured. It wasn't the first time he had said that. I'm sure the goddess would not leave you without one, I said, caressing his face. He shrugged, smirking. Ease okay either way, mates just make you do whatever they want, and men just listen like puppies, he said slyly, glancing at his dad. Me and the girls started laughing as Alejandro frowned, displeased. Oh, I need mates, so I can make them my minions, Skyla exclaimed. Mate, Alejandro corrected her. No, I need an army, Skyla stated, making me smile at her innocence and Alejandro's annoyance. Dante bit into a cookie as he turned back to the TV. So tell me what you kids want to be when you're older, Alejandro asked them. Easy. An alpha, Skyla stated. Yeah? What else? You know, I want to be a villain and take control of the world too. That's your dream, but what do you want to become? Like a doctor, a teacher. I helped. Oh. Now I get it. I want to be a cop. So, I can beat people up. That's not what cops do, Alejandro remarked, but I will. It was obvious that our wild princess hadn't thought about her future yet. I turned to Catalia, remembering her wanting to be a teacher. What about you, Kat? I asked softly. She stared down at her lap before she held out the necklace to me. Will you put it on me? I nodded and, moving her hair, slipped it around her neck. I want to be a scientist or doctor, someone who can help all werewolves who get hurt to get better, to find a way to help them all, so they can still live completely normal lives. She whispered, making my heart break for her. Alejandro frowned, and I hugged her tightly. That's a beautiful idea, I whispered, kissing her forehead. I held her close for a moment before Alejandro nudged Dante with his knee. And you? Me? Who knows, he said, glancing back at us both. Don't be so cryptic. Alejandro frowned. Dante just chuckled. I actually don't know what I'll be in case you think I do. You know I can't really see my future. Well, what do you want to be? Alejandro asked him. I want to be strong, so I can protect everyone. I want to be fair, so I don't do anyone injustice. Alejandro and I exchanged looks as Dante continued. I want to be wise, so I can guard justice, and I want to be the best son, so my mama is proud of me. He finished with a smirk, making Alejandro narrow his eyes. Ah, I am already so proud of you, baby. I said, so proud of his words. Mama's boy. Alejandro growled as Skyla and Catalia laughed jealous. Dante taunted. Nah, just know how Rayhan felt. Alejandro muttered, making me shake my head. Dante smirked. He had told me he was taking a step back from his childish crush and how he would try to stop annoying Rayhan when it came to Dulsanra at least. So didn't Dante and I get a present? Didn't I give you anything earlier? Alejandro replied with a smirk, making me blush. What did you give Mama? Skyla asked. Flowers. I lied quickly. Flowers. Alejandro remarked through the link mockingly. I poked my eyes out at him warningly, but he just smirked and gave me a wink. I got a new scooter. Dante smirked. The one I wanted a few months ago. Perfect. I said, trying to avoid Alejandro's gaze. The movie soon came to an end. We all got into the bed with the girls on either side of me and Alejandro next to Catalia, with Dante on his other side. We discussed where to go for a holiday and when we would go. They were all excited, and so was I. Malevolent was also asleep at the edge of the bed near Skyla's feet. The kids soon fell asleep and Alejandro took my hand, kissing it softly as he looked at me from over Catalia's head full of hair. Thank you, he said quietly. I said, closing my eyes as he caressed my jaw. Relishing in the sparks. Thanks for giving me a life I never could have imagined ever having or hoping for. He said quietly. My eyes opened, and even in the dark, I could see his glowing eyes. My heart pounded as I leaned over, smiling when he cupped my face and claimed my lips in a soft kiss. And thank you for being you. I am the luckiest woman to have you in my life, and our kids are the luckiest to have you as their papa. I whispered through the link as we broke apart. He kissed my forehead, his stubble prickling me slightly, and I smiled softly. My mate. I love you. I whispered. Love you more. We settled back, Alejandro's hand on my stomach as we two fell asleep with all our pups by our side. Alejandro, I looked over at Rayhan as we stood outside the entrance to the Sangui Pack. His hair was pulled into a bun and he had a frown on his face. This is it, I said quietly. Sometimes, admitting that we made a mistake takes a lot. For you to want to do this yourself, I'm proud of you, and I'm sure more than me, Raphael would be prouder. He nodded, as Kiera placed a hand on his arm. We got this, and besides, we're doing this together, she said, giving him a warm smile. Don't make me out as a good person, I only regret that others suffered, not for what I did to those individuals, he said, looking at the gates. Kiera nodded. That is enough in itself, I replied. Does Marcel know we're here? Rayhan asked quietly. I nodded. Yeah, someone should be here to escort us inside, I replied, pulling Kiera into my arms. A few days after my picnic date with Kiera, Rayhan had rang to ask that although Leo refused, if it was okay to visit the Sangui pack. He said he wanted to apologize to those who suffered indirectly from his actions. I was proud that he himself wanted to do this. We all knew it wouldn't change the past, but at least it would give some sort of closure to those who had suffered. Marcel soon arrived, and after meeting us, we all walked through the grounds. How are you holding up since he left? I asked him, referring to Leo. He gave me a small smile. It's hard. Even though he gave me a lot of stress, he was always looking out for me. Leo has a good heart, he's just hurting, I finished. He had a point, we all went crazy. Kiera brushed back a strand of her hair as the wind blew through the trees. She looked as beautiful as ever, with her sandy brown hair pulled back into a braid, and a few strands framing her face. She wore a green silk blouse with a black print on it and black trousers. She looked at me and I pulled her close, kissing her lush lips softly. Dulsanra had wanted to come as well, but Rayhan had told her he'd rather she didn't. I understood his point. After all, this pack was the pack where her abusers lived. It would still be triggering for her, although I knew she was a strong woman. Besides, she had done nothing wrong, so she need not to apologize. Rayhan coming was more than enough. What do you plan to do? Are you sure you don't want me to call a meeting? Marcel asked. No, we will see them individually, a visit not a command for a meeting. Right now, we are here to apologize, and summoning them isn't going to help that, I said coldly. I agree, and if they don't want to see us that's okay too, no one is to be forced, Kiera added, looking at Marcel. He nodded, sighing heavily as we reached the first house. I did tell them I'd be stopping by, he said. I nodded as Marcel rang the doorbell. Kiera had wanted to bring gifts, but we had decided against it. We weren't here to display our wealth. To admit we are wrong, doesn't make one any less. Alpha, the woman at the door, paled the moment she saw me and Rayhan. Her heart was racing as Kiera stepped forward, smiling gracefully. May we come in for a few moments? It won't take too long, she said softly. Opal, who is it? A man's voice came before he came into view. His eyes snapped to Rayhan, and I realized he was definitely one of the men he had beaten. It took me a moment to pair him to the files I had already burned a few days ago. There would be no records on them unless they committed a crime by will. This was the man whose child had been killed when he had refused to beat Dulsanra. The tension was thick. I stepped inside the house, making the woman back away. Mama! A child came running. She was around the twins' age and she looked at us curiously. Go to your room, Ophelia. Opal commanded her and the girl obeyed. Can we have a quick word? I asked, doing my best to sound calm. I was already trying to suppress my aura entirely. They nodded as the man wrapped his arm around his mate. I could smell their fear, and feel their distrust. It showed they only agreed because they felt they had no choice. Please sit, Alpha King. The woman murmured. We all sat down, and it felt too small in here. The man remained standing as his mate sat down, her heart thundering with fear as she gripped her mate's hand that now rested on her shoulder. The reason we are here is to apologize, I said quietly. I'll take it from here, Rayhan added, looking at the man. Years ago, I came here, blinded by my pain and rage. My only goal was to hurt all those who had hurt my mate, but without even realizing. I did the very same thing that I was punishing others for. I hurt you, but indirectly I also harmed your mate. A woman who was innocent. You lost a child for refusing to beat the very species you hated. I can't imagine losing a child. I too would do anything to protect them, so I'm sorry. It won't take back what I have done and it won't change the past, but I apologize. He lowered his head to the man, who looked surprised. The woman looked up at her mate, her eyes glittering with unshed tears of surprise. It's fine, it's in the past, the man replied curtly. Rayhan shook his head. No. Whether it's in the past or present, I still made a mistake. The man smiled slightly and nodded. We all did, but we are beings, we are made to make mistakes. It's fine, you need not worry about it. Thank you for your apology. Thank you for accepting it. I'm sorry for the loss of your child at the hands of Endora, Rayhan said quietly. A silence fell in the room, but somehow, I knew this small gesture would help the couple in their healing. There is always light, Kiara said. Leaning over, she placed a hand on the woman's knee, and I sensed her healing aura flowing into the woman. No doubt, healing whatever internal damage there was. The woman visibly relaxed, and Kiara simply smiled at her. I think I will start going around to every pack in the country and offer to heal what I can. Although we have always made it clear that everyone is welcome to come to us, it's obvious not everyone does or can. Sounds like a plan. Proud of you, Amor mio. Our eyes met, and she smiled softly at me. She was my life. We left after a short while, going on to the other houses. There were a few who refused to see us, but that was understandable. Those who had their mates killed were more hostile, but still Rayhan did his best. I knew he didn't regret killing those men, in that he did feel for those who suffered because of it. Once we were done and we stayed at Marcel's having some refreshments, I looked across at my brother. It was now my turn. I also owe the Sangui pack an apology. I promised you all a fresh start but didn't hold true to my word. Going forward, that's going to change. The files I created on this pack have been destroyed, and as for those who were orphaned back then, those children will have funds created for them so they can have a good start to life and a good education, I said. Marcel smiled. You don't owe us an apology, Alejandro, you have done so much and we appreciate it. You have given me my share of the Rossi Empire and it is more than enough for me to cater for those orphans, although the number is extremely high. And that's why I'm helping, don't argue with me. I growled. All right, I won't. You know this life we have ID because you gave us the chance. Going forward, one too hope that we can carry on stronger than ever. I'm sure Leo will come around. This action from you, Rayhan, was truly admirable, no matter how hard it was. Our mates mean the world to us, and you only did a mate's duty. Yet you were man and alpha enough to admit the damage it did to others. It's not something easy for us of alpha blood to admit, but you did it. Humbly and earnestly. You are a son that anyone would be proud of, and I know that Raphael will be proud of you. He said in a voice so similar to Raphael's that it tugged at something inside. Rayhan smiled slightly. Thank you. He said quietly. Yet, he would be, I said as I leaned forward, picking up my cup of tea from the table. A ray of sunshine fell over my hand, illuminating the room in a warm glow, and I turned towards the window. I hope you are proud. RAF, are you watching over us? Kiera placed her hand on my thigh, sending sparks of warmth through me. I turned, smiling at her. To bonds of every kind. Marcel said, raising his teacup. Rayhan smirked as he raised his own and we all followed suit, clinking our cups together. To family, friendship, honesty, loyalty, and to equality. I downed my cup, giving them a cold smirk as the hot liquid ran down my throat. Yield, to better times. Enrique. I walked through the empty halls of the Escarum mansion, a place that had remained empty for the last few years. The sun shone through the window, and I was able to see the dust particles that hung in the air. Hugo walked behind me. Over the last few weeks, he had become my shadow. He had been our family butler before father had refused to allow him to come along to take care of me and my mother when we left Puerto Rico. He was the one who had saved me the day I almost died, the day that mother was killed. The Leaken King wanted to stay in touch with you, no? I asked coldly. He is only worried for your well-being, young master. I frowned. No. No one cared for me, the memory of him killing my father when I begged him not to. Hours before that fight, I had learned of the curse on our family, the deal with the devil and how father had come to England to find a way to protect me. He only wanted me to not go through what he and our forefathers had. From this day forth, you will refer to me as Alpha. Anyone found to be conversing with the Leaken King will be punished. I said, my voice loud and dear as it echoed, in the empty halls. Yun Alpha. The passage of the Alpha ceremony will be held tonight. I will officially take my place as the leader of this pack, and I expect everyone to listen. The Escara name will not be forgotten. I will fix this pack and I will need your help, Hugo. I promise to pay you well. Young master. I would help you without being offered a pay, my duty is to know. I don't need loyalty to my family, need you to promise your loyalty to me. To show me that I am your Alpha. Why yes, young master. Hugo whispered. What did the Leaken King ask you after I was taken away? I asked. Knowing Hugo had spoken to him, he asked if you had someone to take care of you. Hugo replied. And you also called him? I said, staring. Help, nothing. I need no one. Yes, of course, Alpha. You may go, Hugo, I want to be alone. Ah. Yes, of course, young mast, I mean Alpha. He walked away and I opened my hand, staring down at the clear quartz crystal necklace that was wrapped with gold metal wire with distaste. I don't know why I didn't just throw it away. I didn't want it. The stupid Leekan had given it to me even when I left it in the bathroom. A flare of anger rushed through me, and I flung it across the center courtyard, my heart thumping. I hate you. It's your fault. It's your fault that everything went wrong. I shouted, my voice ringing in all directions. I will never be the alpha I was meant to be because of you. You took away my life. I refused to cry, but the pain was so much. I just prayed to whatever God there was above that I never saw her or her family ever again. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.